Wasn't that fabulous from Faith Soul? Well, we're going to take a moment with all that wonderful music and dancing to just settle back into our chairs and maybe invite yourself just to sense the breath as you feel this breath of life in and out, and just get grounded here in this moment. So often, activists who are interested in making this world a better place are focused outwardly on the things that are going on that we've heard this morning in such a profound way that move us so deeply to try to make a change. And yet, we have a risk, if we're always looking outward, of not taking the time and looking inward. And for many people, for example, I'm a physician in my field, in medicine, what percentage do you think of young physicians out working in hospitals around, in my country, the United States, what percentage do you think are actually experiencing burnout and considering leaving the profession or sometimes even leaving their lives? What percentage? 89%. It's 56%. Over half. And so the journey that we're going to go on in this brief time is to go deeply into why are not just clinicians of all sorts, but activists, creatives, educators, people really who have the courage to care, actually have a biological condition that arises called burnout. So what can we understand about burnout? And how can we transform burning out to actually burning bright and reigniting the passion and purpose that set us on our course in the first place? So we're going to look at what burnout is, which you may know that term as about physical and emotional exhaustion. That it's a time when we can't focus attention as well. And I'll let you know that we're going to make all of these slides available to you. Feel free to take pictures of them, but you're going to get copies of them. So that will be one of your handouts. And as we go through these descriptions of what burnout is, Celine and Thor, our wonderful leaders of the Human Rights Foundation, got all of the Human Rights Foundation's folks to come into this theater, and beneath your seat, they've taped a model of the brain for you to take home. So please reach under your seat and see if you can find it there. They said they put it in there. And pull out your arm, and you'll see attached to your wrist should be a hand. Does everyone have a hand? Now, if you fold your thumb into the middle of your fingers and fold your fingers over the top, this is a pretty, and my daughter always say, don't say it's a handy model, but it is a useful model that's handy also. And we're going to talk about the major parts of this brain because burnout is a biological condition. It's a biological condition that has these signs that if we look at the parts of the brain, the top part of the brain is called the reflective brain. It lets us think and focus attention, and it diminishes in its functioning with burnout. And so this explains that sign of having difficulty focusing. If you lift up your thinking cortex, lift it up, you'll see the thumb area just beneath those fingers. It's the emotional learning brain, sometimes called the limbic brain, and it becomes, in contrast to the cortex, it becomes more active, which explains our emotional irritability and the intense reactions we can have. Now, if you lift up your limbic area, the thumb, and you'll see a brainstem area that's represented in your palm, and this is where we have deep structures that allow us to regulate things like sleep, which gets disturbed in burnout, and also the fundamental networks that allow us to respond to threat, which often in activism we experience, are placed here in the lowest part of the brain, the brainstem. And you'll see in a moment that when we look at this biology, what we can see is that the way this overall system works together as a functional whole, the brainstem, the survival brain is what it's called, the limbic area, the emotional learning brain, and your reflective thinking cortex, when those are not coordinated and balanced, we see all sorts of chaos and rigidity that basically explain the whole biological condition of burnout. So burnout is not a weakness in a person. It's a systems issue where the nervous system has responded to the larger social and ecological system that were a part of our geopolitics. And that person just happens to be having these changes that lead to this difficulty with focusing, with sleeping, with remembering, and losing a motivation and feeling of reward. So one way to understand this with your handout of the handy model of the brain is it's not working well together. But when we go into the details of those networks, we see that there are 7 fundamental needs of being human that not only are what get compromised with burnout, but actually dictators and their regimes try to destroy these 7 needs. So whether this is happening in a colleague of yours that's working together with you in solidarity, and you're going to be of support to that colleague, and recognize that it's not their weakness, but it's a biological response to a systems issue, or you're going to realize this is in your body. Either way, I hope what we're about to go through will be helpful. So the overall need, this foundational need, is called wholeness. And when wholeness is compromised, there are all sorts of ways where we don't feel like we're on the path we're supposed to be in. We feel like if we're a change maker, that we're just not aligned anymore. We don't care anymore about what's going on. Our colleagues may even say, what's going on with you that you don't really have the motivation you used to have? That may be a sign of burnout. Not that a person is in the wrong direction in their work, but they need the intervention and wholeness, a way of realigning with their values. And so wholeness is an overall state that we're seeking, but the ingredients beneath wholeness, you can remember with the letters A, B, C for the beginning of the alphabet, and from those emerge, et cetera, ETC. So this is a way you can remember it. Wholeness is foundational, ABC is at the core, and what arises from that is et cetera, more of those things. And we'll go through each of these briefly. Agency. Agency is the word we use for when you are the center of action and can make things happen. And imagine how a regime is trying to make people who are against the regime feel like they are incompetent. So what we need to do with each other as a team is support how we have some kind of agency, even if it's about us restoring autonomy and a feeling of opportunity, and taking on what's called a growth mindset, where you say that difficulties you're facing are not a sign of your weakness, but actually an opportunity for growth. And then you feel a sense of agency. For the second core need, and these are all in that brainstem area, bonding, we need connections with each other. It's often what drives people to work in activism, to see the human beings that are a part of the system of our communities, or the living beings and a part of our ecological systems. That devotion to life and our relationships is what drives people. So of course, these are have the vulnerability to be compromised. And unlike with agency, when agency is compromised, there's a feeling of irritation and helplessness, which give rise to anger. Here, the emotion is actually separation, distress, and sadness. And so you may find some colleagues or yourself, sometimes you may feel really sad, other times you may feel really angry, because these two networks are very distinct in this brainstem area. So cultivating these supportive relationships and allowing people to see how they can have these relationships supported would be addressing this bonding need. And the third core, ABC, is certainty. Yet we live in an uncertain world, so learning to embrace uncertainty is part of the journey here. What do you think the emotion is when your need for certainty, deep in your brainstem, what would be the emotion that comes up in you when certainty, which is about predictability and protection, when that's compromised, what do you think the emotional experience inside of your body might be? Anxiety, yes. What else? Fear. Fear is a specific network in your brainstem. So you may find some colleagues, when they're burning out, have a lot of fear. Others have a lot of sadness. Others have a lot of anger. But when that emotion is out of control, it's that the higher part of your brain, your cortex, isn't regulating these areas that are coming up from the brainstem through the limbic area, up pushing toward the cortex, where we have language that can say, I'm feeling really, really fearful or sad or angry. But the emotion is generated deep in the brainstem. Knowing this allows you to regulate those emotions. And then emerging at the borderlines between those different things are esteem, which is how you feel about your inner self and how other people feel about you. And this is what a regime is really trying to attack, your feeling of wholeness and being good at what you're doing. That's esteem. The next of et cetera is what? What's the letter? T, for trust. And imagine how you can get people to not rely on each other, feel like they can't depend on people, not trust anymore, and how that would deteriorate your sense of wholeness. So finding a way, even in small ways on your team, to make sure there's transparency and a way of people really being present with each other. And of course, control is something that is a large determinant of whether you feel like you're okay. So it's related clearly to certainty, but it's also about agency. So it's right at the border of those two. And supporting autonomy and learning, even in a small way, to be able to manage your time and influence something can give you a sense of control. Now, here's the story about burnout when you look at this overall model. The whole thing about burnout is that it's kind of like a sprain of an ankle in an athlete. So if an athlete were working out, like working in activism, you're doing your work, and you sprain your ankle, no one needs to say to that athlete, oh my God, there's something really that's a problem with your fundamental character that you've sprained your ankle. This is like spraining your brain, and it's stopped working together. And so the recovery and the repair of this burnout is what we're going to focus on now. What's the sequence that we need to get back to wholeness? To have a feeling of agency, bonding, and certainty, to build on those emerging ones of esteem, trust, and control. So for you, let's say as a leader of a group, you can now know this model deeply, have your handy model of the brain, and realize that when these are compromised, these 7 needs of being a human, then the brain stops working as well as an integrated whole. And that is what burnout is from. So how do we repair from this? Well, there's a sequence, and the sequence is important. Rest, recover, reset, reconnect, and reignite in that order. Because if you say to yourself, hey, I have signs of burnout, let me give myself a day, it's all going to correct itself. When you look at the brain studies of burnout, you know that you need to give the brain time to rest in a way that allows you to have sleep hygiene. It allows you to do these things of breath work, relaxing, reconnecting with the feelings in your body like we did with the breath today. Moving your body like we did with Facial, this important way that you can enjoy things. Having the seriousness of what you're working on in the world, and at the same time, holding the joy of being here. And a lot of activists that I've spoken with feel guilty about feeling gratitude and joy. Their colleagues have been imprisoned or killed. How can they enjoy life? But the fact is, we can hold both. And that's kind of what the journey is about. So resting the body, recovering the mind, realizing this brain literally has had structural changes in it. If you've reached an intense state of burnout, there's mild, moderate, severe states of burnout. But in the significant states, there are changes in literally the structure of the brain. And the good news is that if you do various things, name it, to frame it in a kind way, where you say, okay, I have burnout, you actually can get ready to reset the whole system, to change the structure of the brain, to recover this way that it's been. Now, you may say, how does that happen? Well, you have a superpower. And this is the way to remember it. Where attention goes, neural firing flows and neural connections grow. So in my field, interpersonal neurobiology, where we study all of these different sciences, there has been clear research evidence that if you do the various steps that I'm mentioning here, you can take a brain that has lost its integrative connections and actually grow them anew. And so this is where you can reconnect to people, to nature, to your purpose. And as you do, you're creating a more integrated brain, which experiences harmony and resilience. It can feel the joy at the same time as feeling the suffering in the world. Because as many wise elders have said, if the suffering in the world makes you feel guilty about having pleasure and dancing, about being connected and feeling the incredible gift of being alive, then the suffering will have won. So instead, you can embrace, I can be respectful of the suffering actually by being joyful of the moments of life of connection. And this is how we reignite. We align with our work, with our individual gifts. We appreciate the deep meaning of its commitment, and we realize that we are not just a me in a body, which modern language says who you are is just you in this body. So one take-home message is, for activists and other change makers, it's crucial to go from the tendency to look outward to also develop the skill. It's a different brain network, the skill of going inward. And that's not being soft and weak. That's actually developing integrative strength. That outward is your work, inward is also a part of your work. But then to realize that who we are, our identity, is not just a me. And here's a strange word to remember, but who we are is also a we. But how can you name that singular identity that is both a me and a we? How can you do that? Well, there's a funny little three-letter word, MWE, M-W-E, which activists can use as an identity that we can use to go forward so that we realize burnout is something we all can take care of. If one individual on your team has it, it's not a weakness, it's a part of the system. It's a systems issue, not a personal failure, that we can urge that person, or if that person is in our body, us, to actually rest and recover, and that we can make joy and gratitude a part of each day. And if we do this, then whenever burnout may arise, we now have the pathway to healing and recovery, so that all of the important efforts that each one of the speakers has heartbreakingly spoken about today, and we'll hear more tomorrow, can be supported with solidarity in our collective efforts to change this world toward freedom and connection. Thank you so much for your kind attention.